Jeremy Van Ginneken from Thames Water. Welcome, Jeremy. Catchment management, protecting drinking water quality. Is that all that you need by way of introduction? I hope so, because that's currently all I have by way of introduction. So please do expand as necessary.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm Jeremy Van Ginneken, and I work in a different team as Tim's team, and I work in the catchment projects team. And I've been asking a bit of an overview of what my team's remit is and projects that we're running in the EVLO from this year. So a bit of an overview. So in this presentation, I'll cover a brief introduction to Thames Water and what the catchment projects team gets up to, how the catchment looks like and where the area ends up, the drinking water challenges and data specific to the even load, and our activities and projects and how you can get involved. So Thames Water is an enormous company supplying 9 million customers and approximately serving 25% of the UK population. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it through the even load catchment partnership. So I'll move on to what my team specifically gets up to. So I'm a catchment scientist as part of the catchment projects team, and our focus is protecting drinking water quality at our abstraction points. We mainly do this by understanding the risks, raising awareness and finding solutions and implementing projects. On a catchment scale, this usually means working with farmers to target pesticides and nitrates. Thames Water's main catchment area is a very big one, 11,000 square kilometres, and water landing on the ground in any of these areas alongside anything with it ends up in ditches and streams into the rivers that we abstract from and treats to send out as drinking water. The shaded areas are for our groundwater catchments. This is where water landing on the surface can over time work its way down into the aquifer, where we pump water from the underground to treat and send out as drinking water. Our groundwater catchments, the main concern tends to be nitrates, whereas in surface water, so rivers, it tends to be pesticides. So the even load is located at the purple circle, which eventually makes its way into the Thames and feeds large populations of West London. So what's the issue? Pesticides. So the Drinking Water Inspectorate has set the drinking water standard for pesticides very low. Only a very small amount is permitted, so it's 0.1 micrograms per litre. This is not a health-based standard. This is actually based on the concept that people should not be having pesticides in their drinking water quality. It's actually the equivalent to 1 grain of wheat in 390 tonnes. So it's very little. Unfortunately, pesticides are often found in rivers above the level, so we are reliant on treatment to remove them, which isn't the most sustainable option as it's quite energy intensive and expensive. And it's always a bit of a lose-lose situation. Pesticides are quite expensive, so if they're ending up in the river, they're no longer doing their job in the field and costs the farmers money as well. Over the years, we've taken lots of water quality samples from the rivers across our catchments and analysed them for selected pesticides. This has helped us build up a picture of which parts of the catchments are higher risks and which ones are lower. Where do we usually see pesticides at high concentrations every year, and where do we rarely see them? And this has kind of helped us understand where we need to focus our efforts. So as you can see again, the purple blob is the even load, which shows as high risk for propyzamide. So where are we currently focusing our efforts? So this map shows our current work areas. The dark green areas are catchments that we worked in for the last couple of years, and the light green ones are where we've expanded this year. These are areas where we think it's especially worthwhile to try and work with farmers to protect drinking water quality and abstraction. So specific to the even load, we won't be covering the entire even load catchment. Through risk modeling software, we are targeting the upper and lower even load, as the modeling software showed that the middle section of the catchment was modeled as a significantly lower risk. This modeling software takes quite a few things into account, mainly soil type, whether the field is drained or not, and the local geology. As you can see at the bottom of the catchment is a red arrow, which is actually one of our sampling points. At that sampling points, this is what the water quality data has been looking like in terms of propyzamide and metaldehyde. In terms of quantity, propyzamide is probably the worst one we tend to see. We see it a lot at most of our abstraction points, and we've seen some really high results in even load. So the drinking water standard I mentioned earlier is highlighted in red at 0.1 micrograms per litre, and we've gone as high as 2.6. It's however important to reiterate that this is not the water that we're sending out for in supply. This is before any treatment. Propyzamide is a selective post-emergent herbicide, which is regularly used in crops such as oilseed rape and winter beans to control broadleaf weeds and most grass weeds, including blackgrass, without damaging the crops. It shows a quite seasonal pattern with peaks in the winter months, often above the drinking water standard. So what are we doing? We're offering water quality updates to farmers in these target areas. We send these out on a quarterly basis. If you are in the relevant area and haven't received them yet, or would like to, then please let us know and we can add you to an email list. These water quality updates include pesticide and nitrate data on the area and the latest results, so you can see what's turning up in your local water. We also offer events where we take a bit of a deeper dive into the local water quality parameters and the projects we're running, alongside with some expert agricultural speakers covering a wide range of topics. In our target areas, we're offering free farm advice by our local project partner. In even load, this will be catchment sensitive farming. They can come to your farm and have a discussion about topics broadly relevant to water quality. That might include looking at nutrient management plans or integrated pest management plans, looking at soil health or infrastructure, or helping with applications for countryside stewardship or ELMS. We're also offering our catchment fund. The catchment fund is essentially a pot of money to financially incentivize farmers to move towards water-friendly farming practices. Here they can apply up to £15,000 per farming business per year. It is a competitive scheme, and we're expected to become more competitive as we've expanded substantially this year. Application deadlines are the same every year, so the end of May and end of November. We offer funding towards quite a wide range of activities, anything from cover crops to farmyard infrastructure, education options, and farmers are also able to suggest their own innovative suggestions that have a benefit to water quality. In addition, we're also trialling a new scheme. This is the Bespoke Water Quality Improvement Projects, which has a funding cap of £40,000 per year, where we expect a more substantial benefit to water quality over a longer period of time. So this will be for a minimum of 5 years. So this could, for instance, be a pesticide handling area on your farmyard. And to give you a bit of a flavour of what these activities look like, starting off with winter cover crops. So these are a crop that you grow between your main cash crops that avoids bare soil. So this would slow down any runoff and pesticides along with it. Then in the middle, you have a inter-row hoe. So instead of using chemicals, this is a mechanical way of controlling weeds. And on the right, you have an example of what precision pesticide application technology might look like. So farmers use quite a large quantity of pesticides. And if you improve the accuracy that you can apply them in, it would avoid any overlap. And at the end, reduce your overall application. So I hope that's been interesting. It was a bit of a whiz through, but please do let me know if you're interested in receiving any water quality updates or farm advice visits, or even applying to the catchment fund. Thank you for having me today, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, and apologies for mangling the pronunciation of your name at the outset. Right, hands already going up. Tim, I think I saw you up first.
It'll come as no surprise. That's great interest. Thanks very much, Jeremy, for the presentation. I'm really interested to know how we break down some of the silos and thinking of addressing some of these problems. So it's another fund, it's another bucket of money for CSF, and there's actually a dearth of resource out there with the recruitment freeze, and there's no CSF officer at the moment. But you know, we've got, on the one hand, we've got this stream of work. We've got another problem that we've got no water in the aquifers. It's not being recharged. We've got another problem in that flooding is causing all sorts of problems, not only to your own assets and Thames water, but all sorts of other reasons as well. I'm just wondering whether we could break down some of the siloed thinking and the different funding streams for capital to come up with a more joined up thinking across flooding, aquifer recharge and water quality, and not just in capital investment, but also thinking about revenue investments as well. For instance, you know, we're working with Thames Valley Flood Scheme to incentive, well, see if we can get natural flood management over the line at a catchment scale, not just in big bunds and edge of cities. And this would sit very nicely. If you increase soil health, you will reduce many of your inputs, and what inputs do go on will stay in field and not get run off into the catchment, into the river. So I'm just wondering what you're doing to work with other receptors, be it floodwater, aquifer recharge, and also other stakeholders, the EA and others. And rather than just having more capital investment, such as we've heard about FIPL this morning, there are also all the technology funds and so on through DEFRA. I think that the problem is there's a lack of rewarding outcomes, and there's lots of slosh going into capital. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant. You don't have to answer all that now, but I'm also, we haven't had you in catchment to talk to our farmers, so it would be great to have that conversation as well, maybe offline now, but I'll just seed that thought. Sorry to, if it's...
No, it's an interesting point. We received a lot of feedback that there's quite a few funds available, and I think as we're hoping to work a bit more closer with with catchment sensitive farming, and this will hopefully avoid numerous consultancies walking down the farmyard. In terms of water resources and flooding and recharging, that's not something that we've looked into as a team specifically, but I can reach out to that team and perhaps get a bit more of a better response for that.
So just to chip in there, something that we're thinking about is, because we've got all of our different programs like WRSE, DWMP, I could list a lot more acronyms. Something that we're thinking about internally is how do we join up kind of the catchment opportunities that exist at scale, apply some sort of MCA that would be beneficial for Thames, but also for wider, so Environment Agency, Natural England, to understand what opportunities exist, where they can tackle multiple drivers, and then either test it in kind of smarter water catchments, the additional benefits methodology, or roll it out wider. So it's something we are thinking about, and we know that there needs to be a lot of conversations with other people that are either distributing funds. So Jeremy's right with we're going down the, I know there's no CSF, Ellen's gone, but the approach going forward would be that the Smarter Water Catchments consultant contract and the catchment farming team contract sits together, and they all go down together to say this is an option for catchment fund, this is an option for the wetlands and woody dam fund, this is other options for Smarter Water Catchments and Thames. But we need to do a lot more work to understand how we join that up properly and maximize kind of green finance and how we do it together. So I know we've had initial conversations, Tim, but we need to kind of progress them a bit further to how we can change and bring in other people as well.
Okay, thanks. Vaughan, just before coming
Nick,
to you,
could we pick up on that offline, and I welcome anyone else in the group to jump on that, particularly Anne, obviously.
Yeah, Rosie, I was just wanting to ask, is there a time scale for that in mind? I mean, it's obviously quite a complex thing to be working through, but do you have within the organisation a point in time at which you think, yeah, we'll have a clearer idea of what the, you know, how best to bring all these different elements together?
Not explicitly. It's something that we're working on for the AWINEP submission, and thinking about how we can join up and how we can potentially create innovative platforms that bring kind of different funding mechanisms together and showcase opportunities. I think it's more of a longer term thing that we need to think through, because first we need to understand all of our different assessment methods and then how you join them up and then go externally to Natural England EA. So I can't give you a timeline as in 2 years time, but it is on the horizon.
Okay, thanks. Vaughan.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Jeremy, couple of things. First, if we could have the data set for Cassington, that'd be interesting for all parameters. That would be really handy. Is it downstream of the sewage works or upstream on the Thames, or is it actually on the even load?
I'm not sure where the sewage works is located.
It's on the Thames, but I mean, if you give us a data set, that'd be really handy. That'd be nice. So nitrates, farmers are always being hammered for nitrates, MVZs, and all of that. But a huge volume of effluent from your sewage treatment works has got very high nitrate levels, and you do nothing to control those. So it's just a point to put that into context. Farmers are, get some fairly prescriptive stuff on them and get blamed. And I'm pretty critical of farming, but also very critical of the water industry. You're not doing anything to control your nitrates. So that's for everyone to think about. And the third is that the catchment funds that Thames have done, and I've got the data from the output so far and what Thames has actually achieved on the ground, how many hectares of this, that, and the other, minimum till, how many kilometres of hedging planted, and all of that. It's pretty small scale, So my argument to you, or my challenge to Thames, has been before: you are not land managers. You cannot intervene at scale because you haven't got the resources or the finance. If you did, the money you would be putting in on a perpetual basis, you should be actually using to sort out your point source discharges at your sewage treatment works and leave land management probably to others. But if you are going to intervene, then the one thing to me seems fairly obvious is that you should intervene on a market basis. So some of those pesticides, like metaldehyde, that has obviously gone. One of the key and obvious things would have been to make slugs cheaper and metaldehyde products more expensive and push people in the way you want using a market-based solution. It's obvious. It's like phosphorus in detergents. It's no good shouting at people not to use it in their washing machine. You take it out of source. So if Thames and the other water companies are serious, then you would probably start intervening on that pesticide market and pushing products your way. Now that's difficult. You'll get a huge amount of pushback from the manufacturers. It's like it's a wet wipe argument again, but I suspect it's probably the only logical way for you to go ultimately. Anyway, a few things.
Sorry, just quickly to pick up on that. The figures that I know that you're mentioning are just from the AMP6 phosphorus scheme, so nothing to do with what Jeremy's team has been doing. So those stats are separate. We gave you.
I've got all the. I did an EIR, Rosie. I've got everything.
No, I know, and I helped with the EIR one. Sorry.
But
it's just from. No, it was just from the catchment fund, as in AMP6, not the work that Jeremy's team has been doing across wider Thames. Sorry for that clarification.
Okay, but he hasn't visited, as I understand from Tim, the even load. So that's it for the even load, isn't it? But I am correct, I think, on that. Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is our first year in the even load. Give you a bit of an idea of scale. We've agreed to fund over 140 funding agreements over a value of £1 million. It's interesting you mentioned. Sorry,
that's across Thames, is it?
Across Thames.
Yeah, I mean,
but we're still expanding year by year. So I'm hoping that number will increase.
And with respect, Jeremy, it's paperclip money, and it has got the longevity. You've got to build this in for 30, 40, 50 years. And Tim's obviously working to change agriculture's face in general, and that's laudable and it's probably helping. But the thing that will drive agriculture above all other is money. And unless you're going to, intervene on those market-based ways at a big scale, then you won't impact water quality. And if you intervene at a big enough scale on a big enough catchment, then you will find your pockets are completely empty, and that money would be better spent on dealing at point source do what you're supposed to do. You know, it's like Stagecoach pouring out emissions from all of their coaches and then planting a few trees in the parks to say that that's helping to sort the problem out. Do what you're supposed to do is my argument, and leave the catchment based stuff really to other people. We're so well covered with so many advisors and so many projects, and the worry is that Thames is just taking its eye off the ball and using land-based solutions, including ICWs, as a mechanism to deflect attention from its big problem, which is sewage work.
Thank you.
That's useful feedback. In terms of trying to influence the market, back in the Matilda days before it was banned, we had 2 projects. We had product substitution. So when farmers were using alternative projects, we would pay them to do so. And we also had water quality based incentives. So if there was low metaldehyde in certain catchments, we would pay all the farmers within it to kind of create an environment that's a bit that you want all your neighbours to use metaldehyde less, as that would financially incentivize the whole catchment. But now we move towards the catchment fund.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's the Slux thing was great. I mean, you know, it was a good example where it was made cheaper or better or more useful to use that, and it worked.
Okay. John and then Tim. John Pratt. Don't know if you're
Sorry,
still
I'm back on now. Yeah, can you
back
hear me
on.
now?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Nick.
yeah.
So, Jeremy, thank you very much for your presentation. Really interesting. Just giving some context, it's very interesting to note that phosphate use on farms has halved over the last 40 years or so, and nitrate use continues to decline. And this is something which Tim and his colleagues are following up on too locally. You mentioned the company's preoccupation with nitrate in drinking water. Are there any other fertilizer chemicals which are of concern to Thames water, or is it only nitrate? Thank you.
As far as I'm aware, it's only nitrate.
Yep, thanks very much.
Phosphorus isn't a concern to drinking water. It's fairly easily removed by chlorine.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Tim, over to you again.
I think John stole the line there, but yeah, Andrew dug out a whole load of information on nitrogen usage and phosphorus usage in the catchment and so on. But my point is just to echo what Vaughan says. That there's a lot of capital funds out there. It would be great if a lot of that capital payment went into your own infrastructure, but that's not to say we don't want to work with you, because your data is really important to us, because we can value every hectare of water storage or reduced input or anything else. We can put a value on that. Whether anyone pays for it is another story, but it's still important to value it. So that's why I'm very keen to work with you, whether it's transactional in money terms or not. You are one of the biggest stakeholders in this catchment because of the water shortage that we're inevitably going to face over the next 20 to 30 years. And so it's important that we look after that asset. And so we need to put a value on it, and that's why we need the data, and that's why we're keen to work with you. But yeah, I'll echo Vaughan's point as well. You're not going to touch the sides if you in terms of what the if you were to actually monetize that value to Thames Water, and if you were, that would be better spent in your own infrastructure. So I'll echo Vaughan's point on that, but it's more about the data and the value that a farmer can provide to you if they're doing the right things. And I just think we need to be more strategic rather than throwing more people into advisory roles and capital funds. Sorry to echo that again, but that's just to echo Vaughan's point.
And Tim, can I ask Tim, Jeremy, are those links for that data sharing that you're asking for, do they exist at the moment? Are they working? If they do, are they working as they should? Or is it something that, you know, we through this partnership can do more to improve?
From a landscape recovery project perspective, go back to the first question of the morning. We've only just got the data person in post, but I understand there is data out there, and it's down to the Oxford University and posts that we've got to unpick all that, yeah, you'll hear from her in due course. And if there's a gap in data, that's where we need to look. But I understand that the catchment partnership's been very busy collecting data, so we want to make the absolute most of that and any other data that's out there.
Okay, well, so that's good. All that sounds heading in the right direction. And if there are problems, hope we can use the the partnership and the smarter water catchment model as a basis for trying to improve things. John, did you have another point, or is that an old? It's fine. Okay. I still can't hear you, John. I don't know if that was. Anyway, if it's gone, it's gone. Cool. Thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you all for that. Jeremy, thank you again. I think some clear sort of feedback and thoughts coming from our side. Final point perhaps from Mark.
So it's just a question actually in terms of stacking the funding. Is this instead of catchment sensitive or CS, or can it be added to catchment sensitive funding and CS?
So we don't double fund, but we need to co-fund. So let's say you're building a pesticide handling area. Catchment sensitive farming could, for instance, fund the roof, and we could fund the concreting. And especially with our innovation option, where you come up with your own suggestions, there's a bit more room for collaboration, but we won't fund for the same activity twice.
Sorry, I mean, okay, so it can't be stacked with control
No.
stewardship or whatever. Okay, it's either or then. So it's either control stewardship, for example, or the Thames Water Catchment Fund. It's not
For the same activity, yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Tim?
Could I just have a point of clarity on that? But for a 50% grant funded FIPL, you could be the other 50% match funded as opposed to stacked.
Yes, potentially with that will work with FIPL, yes.
Yeah.
So yes, match,
Yeah,
not
that was a
stacking.
question for you, Mark. Yeah.
Okay. Is that good? I hope that answered whatever the question was. But yeah. Okay. Jeremy, good question for me. If I'm correct in understanding, you've only got the one water quality monitoring point down at Cassington, and I appreciate you're presumably therefore covering the whole of the Thames region. And that's a big area, but that seems an awful lot of potential points of entry of pesticides not being monitored. I'm just wondering, it doesn't seem a particularly fine grain of information in order to be able to try and influence things. Whether there are ideas for why that sampling intensity was settled at, and whether there is benefit in making that more widely distributed.
So the areas of where we sample are quite strategically set, so tend to be at bottom of catchments where the four rivers meet together and combine the water quality. It is quite expensive sending out someone to sample, and especially sampling at the labs as well. I think there is scope in looking into a bit further. However, our labs and sampling team got quite hard hit. Last year was short-staffed, unfortunately.
Okay,
so it's 1 point for the even load, but we have more network points for our entire catchment fund area. And if the ECP wanted, we could diversify our monitoring strategy to look at pesticides if we felt it was a good use of smarter water catchments money.
Yeah, which brings us again back into the discussion which we just had. Yeah, fine. Okay. One to take away. Right. Okay. I think that brings that one to an end. Jeremy, once again, thank you very much. Very interesting. Not an area certainly that I know much about. So yeah, certainly.
Thank you for having me.
Again in that front.